On a cold February night in 1978, 5 young men from Yuba City, California, drove into the Sierra Nevada foothills and never returned. Days later, their car was discovered abandoned on a remote, snow-covered mountain road. Months passed before the first bodies were found, some decomposed, one preserved in a trailer under chilling circumstances. One of the 5 was never located. This bizarre and tragic case became known as the mystery of the Yuba County 5. To some, it's been compared to the Dyatlov Pass incident, a 1959 Soviet case where 9 hikers died under eerie and unexplained conditions in the Ural Mountains. Both cases share threads of sudden disappearance, exposure to brutal cold, and a trail of incomplete evidence that only deepens the mystery. But unlike Dyatlov, the Yuba County 5 weren't outdoorsmen. They were fans of basketball and Big Macs. They lived with various mental health challenges, and they weren't supposed to be anywhere near a snowbound mountain that night. So why were they there? Theories range from misadventure to foul play, from paranoia to something more sinister. The facts are unsettling. The gaps in logic are vast, and the evidence left behind suggests not chaos, but calm, tragic intention, or fear. This is not a story of ghosts or legends. It's a true account of 5 men who entered the woods and never came back the same, if they came back at all. Welcome to the case of the Yuba County 5, sometimes called the American Dyatlov. On January 10, 2013, Kendrick Johnson attended classes like any other day. The following morning, he was reported missing by his family after he failed to return home the night before. His mother, Jacqueline Johnson, called the school, made rounds to friends' houses, and waited for information. None came. That same morning, students at Lowndes High School entered the old gym and noticed a foul smell. Some traced it to a rolled-up wrestling mat, standing vertically in a corner. When they looked inside, they saw a pair of sock-covered feet protruding from the center. The discovery halted everything. Authorities were called. Emergency services responded quickly, cordoning off the gymnasium. Inside the mat, positioned head down, was the lifeless body of Kendrick Johnson. He was upside down in a tightly wound mat that stood over 6 feet tall and roughly 3 feet in diameter. His torso had compressed under his own weight, making recovery of the body difficult. First responders had to cut him out. At the bottom of the mat lay one of Kendrick's white and orange gym shoes. His other shoe was found near his body, along with a hoodie and some earphones. Witnesses say there was blood on the floor, but law enforcement determined it came from an unrelated source, blood that had already dried and tested negative for Kendrick's DNA. Within hours, the school notified students' families and canceled gym activities. News of the discovery spread rapidly throughout Valdosta. By that evening, the story had broken. A teenager was dead under mysterious circumstances in a place where students were supposed to feel safe. Authorities released an early statement. No foul play suspected. A preliminary investigation suggested Kendrick may have tried to retrieve his shoe from the center of the mat, fallen in, and become trapped. To some, it seemed plausible. But to Kendrick's family, it never made sense. In the days following Kendrick Johnson's death, the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office moved quickly to form a conclusion. According to their official report, Kendrick had died in a tragic accident. Investigators stated he had likely climbed onto the rolled mats to retrieve a shoe he had stored inside. He may have dropped it into the mat's hollow center and, in an effort to retrieve it, leaned in head first and slipped. Trapped vertically, unable to breathe or call for help, Kendrick suffocated. The term used by the state medical examiner was positional asphyxia, a condition where the position of the body prevents normal breathing. The timeline, according to officials, was straightforward. Kendrick entered the gym alone. Surveillance footage showed him walking in. No one was seen entering with him. No sounds of struggle. No visible confrontation. They noted that students often stored their belongings inside or behind the rolled mats to avoid locker fees. It was treated as normal behavior. To support the theory, authorities even demonstrated how someone Kendrick's size could fit inside the mat. They claimed his shoulders were narrow enough, and the mat's interior wide enough for such an accident to occur. The case was closed in less than a month. To some observers, the logic followed. The scene appeared undisturbed. There were no defensive wounds or outward signs of trauma, according to the initial autopsy. But something didn't sit right with the Johnson family, or with many who followed the case. Kendrick's parents, Kenneth and Jacqueline, questioned everything. Why had their son gone missing for over 24 hours before being found inside a school gym? How had no one noticed him sooner? And why did the school's emergency response seem oddly delayed? Even more troubling, the mat was standing vertically. To reach his shoe, Kendrick would have had to dive in head first, something his family insisted he would never do, especially alone. The official story had been written, but the family wasn't buying it. Kendrick Johnson's parents were never convinced by the accident narrative. From the beginning, they believed something darker had taken place, and they weren't alone. When the Johnsons first saw Kendrick's body, they were horrified. His face was swollen beyond recognition. His skin was darkened, his features distorted. The funeral director reportedly told them it was due to the effects of gravity and decomposition. But the family saw something else: bruises, injuries, blood that had pooled unnaturally. What they saw didn't align with a simple fall into a gym mat. They publicly rejected the ruling of accidental death. Jacqueline Johnson, Kendrick's mother, became the most vocal. She stood in front of cameras, attended every press conference, and organized rallies demanding answers. "My son did not die accidentally," she repeated again and again. The family also began questioning the timeline. If Kendrick had entered the gym the previous day, why had it taken so long for anyone to find him? Dozens of students passed through the area daily. Could a body remain undiscovered in a school gym for nearly 24 hours without someone noticing the smell or the absence? Then came more inconsistencies. The sheriff's department claimed Kendrick was reaching for a shoe, but both of his shoes were found inside the mat. One was beneath his feet, the other next to his head. If he'd gone in head first, how did the shoe end up behind him? The mat itself raised questions. The opening was just over 14 inches wide. Kendrick's shoulders were broader than that. How had he slid in without resistance? Even more unusual was the claim that he had no outward injuries. The Johnsons claimed otherwise. To them, Kendrick's body suggested trauma, not a passive fall. Driven by these concerns, the Johnsons began seeking an independent investigation. They didn't just want answers, they wanted proof. And that led them to one of the most disturbing turns in the case: a second autopsy and a discovery that would raise the stakes dramatically. Frustrated by what they saw as an incomplete investigation, Kendrick Johnson's family made a critical decision. They ordered a second autopsy. They had Kendrick's body exhumed in June 2013, 5 months after his death. The procedure was carried out by Dr. William Anderson, a private pathologist with years of experience. His findings told a very different story. Unlike the official autopsy, which had concluded positional asphyxia, Anderson determined that Kendrick died from blunt force trauma. Specifically, he cited unexplained, non-accidental blunt force trauma to the right neck involving the carotid artery. In layman's terms, Kendrick had been struck. To Anderson, the injury was not consistent with falling headfirst into a gym mat. It indicated that Kendrick had suffered a blow that could have incapacitated or killed him. But the most shocking discovery wasn't the injury. It was what was missing. According to Anderson, when he opened Kendrick's body, the internal organs were gone. Heart, brain, liver, lungs, all of them had been removed and replaced with newspaper. The funeral home responsible claimed the organs had been destroyed by natural processes during the original autopsy and had been discarded. They said filling the body cavity with newspaper was a standard practice. But to the Johnsons, it felt like evidence had been destroyed. The funeral home was investigated and later cleared of any wrongdoing, but the damage was done. The loss of Kendrick's organs meant critical evidence was now permanently missing. No one, not the family, not a second medical expert, could re-examine those tissues. The case took on a new tone. What started as a local tragedy had evolved into a national story of alleged mishandling and cover-up. The Johnsons doubled down in their pursuit of justice, and the public began to pay closer attention. If the second autopsy was correct, then Kendrick's death was not an accident. It was something else entirely. In a modern high school, surveillance cameras are nearly everywhere. At Lowndes High School, there were reportedly over 30 cameras throughout the hallways, gyms, and common areas. When Kendrick Johnson died, those cameras should have offered clarity. Instead, they raised more questions. Authorities eventually released selected footage from the day of Kendrick's disappearance. In the clips, Kendrick is seen walking toward the old gym. He enters, and then for several crucial minutes, the record goes dark. To the untrained eye, the footage might seem unremarkable, but technical analysts and media organizations soon noticed discrepancies. Multiple camera feeds had timestamp mismatches. Some footage was missing entirely. CNN hired a forensic video analyst who stated that hours of footage appeared to be lost or corrupted. Cameras that should have shown the gym's interior had unexplained gaps, skipping over crucial windows of time when Kendrick would have been inside. Lowndes County officials pushed back. They claimed that no footage was deliberately edited or removed. The cameras, they said, were motion-activated, and Kendrick's movements may not have triggered them. But critics weren't convinced. The missing frames, some lasting several hours, overlapped key moments of Kendrick's last known movements. There were no angles showing how he approached the mat. No images of anyone entering or leaving the gym near that time. The Johnson family and their attorneys argued that the surveillance data had been tampered with or selectively released. They demanded the full, raw footage, but were told that not all data had been stored. The mystery deepened. If Kendrick truly walked into the gym and died alone, why was there no unbroken footage showing it? Why were the angles incomplete? And who had access to the raw video before it was made public? For a case already mired in suspicion, the surveillance footage didn't answer questions. It amplified them. In 2015, 2 years after Kendrick's death, the Johnson family filed a sweeping wrongful death lawsuit. It wasn't just against the school. It named 38 defendants, including classmates, school officials, law enforcement officers, and members of the FBI. The lawsuit alleged that Kendrick had been murdered and that the crime had been covered up. Central to their claim were 2 students, brothers who had once been involved in a fight with Kendrick. Their father, the lawsuit claimed, was an FBI agent. The family alleged that this connection helped shield the brothers from scrutiny and shape the investigation's outcome. The Johnsons believed Kendrick had been assaulted at school. They claimed others had helped move the body and manipulate the scene. The surveillance gaps, they argued, were no coincidence. The accused brothers publicly denied any involvement. They were never charged. They later filed defamation lawsuits against the Johnson family and media outlets, asserting that the allegations had damaged their lives and reputations. One of the brothers testified under oath that he hadn't spoken to Kendrick in over a year and had an alibi supported by school records. As for the lawsuit filed by the Johnsons, it was massive, complex, and controversial. Eventually, it was dismissed by a federal judge. No criminal charges were filed against anyone named. The court found that the Johnsons' allegations were largely speculative and not supported by concrete evidence. However, the Johnsons refiled a modified version of the lawsuit in 2016, continuing to pursue the case under civil grounds. That suit, too, was eventually dropped, this time without prejudice, meaning it could be refiled. To the Johnson family, the lawsuits were not just legal battles. They were tools to expose what they saw as institutional failure. To critics, they were built on theories that could not be proven. By now, Kendrick Johnson's death had become a national symbol, not only of grief, but of mistrust, frustration, and the belief that justice could be manipulated or denied altogether. In October 2013, as public pressure intensified, the U.S. Department of Justice announced it would open a formal review into Kendrick Johnson's death. It was a significant move. The case had drawn national attention, and civil rights activists were demanding federal oversight. Over the next 2 years, federal investigators conducted more than 100 interviews. They reviewed school records, examined electronic data, and reanalyzed forensic materials. The FBI became involved with the goal of determining whether a federal crime, such as a racially motivated hate crime or a civil rights violation, had occurred. The investigation was thorough but secretive. Updates were few. The Johnson family continued to press for answers, organizing marches and press events. Their frustration mounted as months became years without a public resolution. Then, in June 2016, the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia released a final statement. The conclusion: there was insufficient evidence to support any federal criminal charges. The DOJ found no proof of foul play, nor evidence that Kendrick had been murdered or that any officials had attempted to cover up a crime. It was a crushing blow to the Johnson family. They accused the Justice Department of protecting powerful individuals and ignoring critical inconsistencies. To them, the conclusion simply reinforced their belief that institutions could not be trusted to police themselves. For others, the federal findings carried weight. The FBI, they argued, had no interest in protecting local law enforcement or the school. If they saw no crime, perhaps there was none. Still, the unanswered questions remained. The gaps in surveillance, the second autopsy, the missing organs. For many, these were not minor details, they were red flags. Even after the DOJ's final report, protests continued in Valdosta and beyond. What had once been a quiet Georgia town now stood at the center of a painful national conversation about race, justice, and institutional accountability. And for Kendrick's parents, the fight wasn't over. They believed there was still evidence to uncover if someone was willing to look. In March 2021, nearly 8 years after Kendrick Johnson's death, the case was reopened. The announcement came from newly elected Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk. Unlike previous officials, Paul claimed he was willing to take a fresh look, with no preconceived conclusions. Fueling this reopening was a trove of evidence. The Johnson family had acquired 17 boxes of investigative files from the Department of Justice. These boxes contained interviews, forensic reports, and documents from the earlier federal review. The family turned them over to Polk's office, hoping new eyes might yield new answers. For the Johnsons, this was another chance to prove that Kendrick had been murdered. They believed key pieces of evidence had never been properly investigated, and that contradictions in earlier reports were now impossible to ignore. Sheriff Polk reviewed every file personally, stating that his goal was transparency and thoroughness. He spent months combing through records, watching surveillance footage, and re-interviewing individuals involved in the case. But in January 2022, after 10 months of investigation, Sheriff Polk held a press conference to announce his findings. He concluded that Kendrick Johnson's death was a weird accident, the same result as the original investigation in 2013. He stated there was no evidence of foul play, no indication of a crime, and no basis for criminal charges. Polk also released a 16-page summary explaining his decision. He acknowledged the public frustration, but emphasized that his review found no credible evidence to support allegations of homicide or cover-up. The Johnson family was once again devastated. They accused Polk of conducting a superficial investigation and ignoring contradictions. Jacqueline Johnson called the findings an insult. Despite the extensive materials, nothing had changed, at least officially. The 17 boxes were supposed to bring answers. Instead, they left the case exactly where it had started. A boy had died under strange and tragic circumstances, and the explanations remained, for many, deeply unsatisfying. From the beginning, the Johnson family believed that race played a role, not only in Kendrick's death, but in the way the investigation was handled, the media responded, and the public reacted. Kendrick Johnson was a young black teenager in the Deep South, found dead in a high school gym. His family felt that if he had been white, his death would have triggered a different kind of urgency, both from law enforcement and the media. National outlets were slow to cover the story. In the early days, Kendrick's death barely made headlines outside of Georgia. It was only after the second autopsy, the missing organs, and the lawsuit against the FBI agent's sons that national attention followed. But by then, Narratives had already formed, sides had already been taken. Civil rights figures began to take notice. Activists like Reverend Al Sharpton and Benjamin Crump lent their voices to the Johnsons' cause. Rallies were organized. Hashtags began to trend. Justice for Kendrick signs appeared at protests across the country. His name was spoken alongside other young black individuals whose deaths stirred national outrage. Still, the media attention was sporadic. There were moments of intensity, followed by long stretches of silence. The case lacked the sustained coverage seen in other high-profile incidents. Supporters saw this as part of a broader pattern, where the deaths of black youths, especially in ambiguous or controversial cases, were not given equal weight. Local law enforcement pushed back against claims of racial bias, insisting that their investigation followed standard procedures. But to many, the speed of the original ruling, the missing surveillance footage, and the condition of Kendrick's body were impossible to separate from the racial history of the region. The Johnsons never stopped raising this issue. To them, their son's case wasn't just about a single death. It was a mirror reflecting systemic problems, about who gets the benefit of the doubt, who is heard, and who is ignored. Kendrick Johnson's story became more than a mystery. It became a symbol of something bigger. More than a decade has passed since Kendrick Johnson's body was discovered in that rolled-up mat. Yet even now, his story continues to stir debate, suspicion, and grief. Despite multiple investigations by local law enforcement, federal agencies, independent pathologists, and newly elected officials, no one has been arrested. No charges have ever been filed. No official explanation has satisfied all parties. For the Johnson family, the pain has never lessened. They've organized over 100 rallies, held press conferences on courthouse steps, and marched through their hometown. In their eyes, the case has never truly been investigated, not with the rigor, transparency, or independence it deserved. To others, the official findings stand. They point to the absence of clear evidence of foul play. They trust the conclusions reached by multiple agencies over years of inquiry. But the questions haven't disappeared. Why were Kendrick's organs missing? And why was that discovery minimized? Why did the surveillance footage contain time gaps? Why were the gym mats left standing upright for so long? And why was Kendrick's body not found sooner? Why did the school's response feel delayed? And why were potential persons of interest never interrogated more thoroughly? The theories surrounding Kendrick's death range from tragic accident to intentional murder, from institutional incompetence to full-scale conspiracy. But the truth, whatever it is, remains elusive. What is undeniable is Kendrick's legacy. His case brought national focus to how deaths of young black individuals are investigated, how families are treated by the justice system, and how public pressure can force scrutiny even when officials resist. Kendrick Johnson should have been preparing for adulthood. He should have graduated. Instead, his name is now inscribed into a larger narrative, one about mistrust, loss, and unanswered questions that never fade. For many, Kendrick's story is closed by law. But for his family, and for those still asking, the story is anything but over. Kendrick Johnson's death remains one of the most haunting and polarizing cases of the past decade. Officially ruled a tragic accident, yet surrounded by questions that refuse to go away. His story lives on in protests, documentaries, legal filings, and in the unwavering voice of his family. Whether one sees this case as a heartbreaking misfortune or an unpunished crime, it's clear that it reflects something deeper about how truth is sought and how it can remain just out of reach. We may never know what truly happened in that gym, but the conversation continues because silence is not an option. Kendrick's story is a reminder. The facts may close a case, but not always the wound it leaves behind. So what do you think of today's video? Do you have something you want us to feature next? Tell us in the comments. It would also mean a lot to us if you like and subscribe. Close the book if you can. This is Black Chapter.